Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Rooted in Love. So excited to have this amazing guest, part two, with us today with Dr. Sarah Nahar. We had so much to cover in the first one that we couldn't complete. So excited to go deeper into a really special initiative and project that Sarah has been able to ideate and emerge into the world. And we're so excited to talk more about it. But before I go in, I'd like to just share a little bit about Dr. Sarah Nahar. And so she is a nonviolent action trainer and interspiritual theologian who works centers on ecological regeneration, community cultivation, and discard studies. She is also the founder of Anticolonial Arrivants, an emergent political formation that we'll hear all about during this episode today. And Dr. Sarah is also a professor at the University of Michigan in the program in the environment. And so we'll be having this conversation that's actually going to be part of a larger discussion from the Black Midwest Initiative. And so super excited to just go ahead and dive into all the work that you're doing. Just amazing, and such an honor to be with you today, Dr. Sarah.
Thank you. It's great to
Yes.
meet you, Colette. And congratulations on the launch of what you're doing in the world and helping us weave these themes of who we are and how we show up right now.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the support always. So yeah, I'd love to just go for it. I'd love to hear more about this, how this idea formulated around anti-colonial arrivants. What is anti-colonial arrivants? And yeah, maybe going deeper into that context and that background.
Yeah. So as someone who lives and was living on Haudenosaunee land, here I have the image on my chest of a wampum that shows the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, which is the original Confederacy, not the Southern one, that represents, nations coming together to figure out how to be together in peace with one another. I was living there in Syracuse, New York, right there, like on Onondaga Nation, and we were working on challenging settler colonialism. And a lot of the readings in this amazing class that I took with Dr. Dax Salzman called Indigenous Feminist Theory and Thought, it was really important to critique European colonization and the impacts of that on Indigenous peoples of now the so-called Americas, but Turtle Island and Abya Yala, right? And I learned so much from the discourses around settler colonization, and in working on the doctrine of discovery, which is this whole religious, legal, international commerce framework that permitted European monarchies and whoever was working on their behalf to invade, destroy, search out, capture, vanquish, and reduce people and persons and places to perpetual slavery. I was looking at how all of these things were happening at one time. And so the framework of settler colonization is extremely helpful. But I also think that framework around enslavement and how this transit of people in this triangle trade between Africa, Americas, and Europe was critical to understand from a more complex way. And I was so grateful to read Jody Bird's Transit of Empire. And Transit of Empire is an incredible text I highly recommend that looks indeed right at these things and says, well, we have these discourses about freedom, which is a precious discourse to people like me, myself being the descendant of trafficked Africans 7 generations ago, as well as I'm descendant of fugitive Mennonites from Europe about 7 generations ago as well. And Bird was able to say, like, so you speak about freedom, we speak about rights, we speak about all this, but what of the land and water space in which those discourses emerge? So basically, it was a very awesome theoretical environment, which helped me say, what does it mean for me, who is a person who is not indigenous to Turtle Island and also not white, to participate in figuring out how I might be in deep decolonial solidarity and work, as well as continue to grieve and work for justice due to the impacts on my community by colonization and racism. The other piece we read in that course related to how important anti-racist work was, but if anti-racism work does not also take into account the impacts of settler colonization, the land and water and peoples who saw themselves as places, as connected beings with the webs of life, where those anti-racism trainings are taking place, we're also missing a huge aspect of what it means to do anti-racism work. Although, as Indigenous folks seeing themselves within nations and ethnicities and cultures don't necessarily relate to a racialization discourse, it doesn't overlay exactly. There was an offering within that class to create journal articles or projects or ways of being that help to hold and address some of our deepest questions. I realized my central calling through this was to look at anti-colonial anti-racism. And in Bird's writing, they quote Kamau Braithwaite, a Barbadian poet, who says, "We are arrivants to this place." And when I learned of that term, arrivants, my heart lit up. How do you call people who are not white and not indigenous to this land? Are we immigrants? It doesn't quite fit. Are we forced settlers? Are we just settlers? And we have to just say, look, we're part of settler colonization and we are not indigenous. Therefore, the responsibility is on us just as much as other white folks or land owning folks. Maybe we're unwilling settlers. Some are certainly refugees, but not all of us. And of course, these umbrella terms come with some liabilities, right? Like, it's not a one size fits all. But I was hoping that the term arrivant could help us find each other as folks who are not white and also not indigenous, though we have some folks in our emergent group that have mixed indigenous ancestry, but we're not necessarily raised within cultures of practice, resistance, and located culture, right? And so I think that if the settler colonial racial capital state has a place for people of the global majority in it within the context of Turtle Island, then we have a place from which to resist the discourse of just get success in society and find a way to create justice that works for you and your community, but doesn't take into account the land, right? And the peoples of the land. We can resist those discourses and find ways to redefine success as deep relationship, to see our safety as not bound up with obedience with the state, but rather devotion to one another and the relationships that help us, abolish the state and state violence. So this is where the dream is emerging from.
Wow. This is absolutely phenomenal. And I so deeply admire this really intense exploration of language and how important it is to figure out what is the language that we use for our own identity being here in occupied land of Turtle Island, and who are we? And it's something that really resonates with me because I never even really thought about it, to be honest, growing up, because of course we were conditioned to not think about it, that we're just all Americans, and it's just like a blanket statement that's our belonging. And yet, as a Palestinian and coming from a place that was colonized and that has settler colonialism as its main obstacle right now, as it's like, oh wait, what's happening over there? Like, what is my identity here in the US then? Even though this idea of if a refugee or forced settler, if that is the right term to use. And so arrivant is really, really fascinating to think about as a different term to use. And I'm wondering if you're able to share more about what about arrivant, the word arrivant, resonates with you specifically too.
Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing your experience and just really connecting in with that doctrine of discovery and domination that I spoke about. I mean, in so many ways, Palestine was the target also of a lot of those early documents that date before Columbus sails, but are all about trying to avenge the Crusades. And so the Crusaderism there's a line that we can follow from that time all the way through today in terms of what's happening. And so finding each other across these waters and these stories are so important. And so Arrivants really speaks to me as like a neologism, right? Like I think the poet Kamau Braithwaite like just like emerged it, as the poets can do for us, right? And Bird picks up on it in Transitive Empire. And so it's arrivant is kind of clean from the perspective of one arrives. And in fact, we open each of our calls that we have on the equinoxes and the solstices of each year. We open with the question, how are you arriving? When we manifest in presence, there's something both holy in that each of us are showing up and in our whole selves, and dreadful, like the conditions under which we show up to one another, again mediated through often these computers, as at this point we haven't had an in-person gathering, but even so, you know, the amount of energy intensiveness it would take to get together at this time, it is a lot. And the fact that we are even in this formation at this moment is a very humbling situation, because none of us chose it, and yet here we are. And so Arrivants also, one of my dear friends, another artist, Helen Hale, said, when I hear Arrivants, I hear a type of insurgency in the verb, like arrivancy and arrivants. There's an energetic power to it. And that is what we'll need to summon to destabilize the status quo towards a hope for another way of being together.
Profound. That is absolutely beautiful. And I love that you bring up presence, because it's like, yeah, how do we want to create this new world that is anti-racist and anti all the things that have caused so much harm? And the only way that we're going to be able to do that is if we are arriving fully as our whole selves in the present moment. And so using the word arrive is just very powerful. Very, very powerful. Thank you for going into that more. So yeah, maybe if you're open to sharing more, I guess, like the initiative itself and what is the structure of this container to go deeper into.
Currently, we have two structures. One is a very slow moving listserv in which people share the email addresses with each other. And if anyone is aware of a call from an Indigenous community for accompaniment, they can put that on the listserv. And then they can know that a lot of other people of the global majority are seeing that as well. And if people choose to go, they can find each other through this vehicle to be able to support each other when they're there. This is important because, for example, at Standing Rock in 2016, there was a broad call, and it was amazing how many people answered the call of the Osheti to say, come and help us stop the Dakota Access Pipeline and help us live into other ways of building and transforming the world. So the listserv grows out of experiences like that, so that our folks can find each other and can do good anti-racism work there, which is always necessary because racial capital is always acting and has so much pressure on everyone, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, and because anti-Blackness is global, in every community it shows up. And even in doing anti-racism, we want to hold that with humility and solidarity in the space that we're in. And that often takes teamwork. And so it's about also sharing, like, folks are not alone, and coming together. And it was pretty amazing, the work at Standing Rock, the ways in which there were formations then of people of color and people of the global majority within the context of doing that decolonial work, so we could find each other. And this would be a vehicle that does that in between those calls. So that's what it's available for. And it's also, of course, then available for sharing information, questions, and ideas. So that is one of the vehicles. And the second is on each solstice and equinox. Currently, it's on the Sunday closest to that, and generally around 5 in the evening Eastern time, 2 in the afternoon Pacific. 3 p.m. Hawaii. There is an opportunity for about an hour and a half to hold what we've called our online like sacred fire. We respect everyone's spiritual practices or humanizing practices, and people bring those. We talk about how we're arriving, and we resource one another to be able to continue to show up fully. And that's been really significant in terms of sharing. And it's not obligatory if you're on the listserv to come to a sacred fire, but we hold that space open. And I do think there's a lot of possibilities for the future. Here at the end of 2025 Common Era, we're just at the beginning. We got our kickoff in a really wonderful space in 2022 at the Rethinking Thanksgiving event. And that's hosted by a coalition of organizations that are Indigenous led and allied organizations that want to rethink that particular holiday and recognize the deep story and lie that racial capital settler colonialism tells as to what the relationships were like between Indigenous peoples and colonists very specifically. Right. And so by rethinking some of these national myths, we have the opportunity to potentially, hopefully, be different with one another. And so that's where we launched in 2022. So we're just like 3 years in, and we're like totally not on a settler timeline with how this grows or anything. But we like slowly but surely people are finding this space, and I love that they are feeling seen in who they are and in their cultural community, and not flattened into just being settlers, but able to both again work very hard on what is happening, for example, in terms of, especially like towards the end of the pandemic, ongoing violence against Asian American elders, right? Like we want to give that time and attention and see it within the colonial context that it's in, or working to stop ICE raids and militarization of the cities and trying to, quote, protect democracy while also holding deep questions about how this country's founding, based on genocide and enslavement, didn't even allow for truly democratic ways of being, right? So we're out there in the streets trying to uphold institutions that we have deep questions about, but we want to ask those questions in spaces that are safe and not spaces that are being captured by the disillusion of the state by Christian nationalists or Christian Zionist forces.
Oh man, I feel like this, it touches on so many different components of what is going to be needed for liberation. So it's incredible that you have like the community component, the piece of like just going to get to go deeper into understanding how we even got to where we are today in more of that, I mean, theoretical, but then also very tangible ways. And so it's really profound. And I'm wondering, in terms of the community aspect, like if you have any specific stories or anything that has come up in the space of people sharing and sharing resources, sharing stories, that has been any kind of like profoundly transformational experience in that collective space that you're building.
I'll share two. The first one is creating a collective that, when we say we resource each other, we leave time to say, does anyone have a direct ask for mutual aid? One of those direct asks came around someone who was impacted by interpersonal violence. The rest of the group was able to respond with presence, with skilled resources.
Wow.
And with information. You know, when terrifying things like that happen in one's life, isolation can be the most difficult and disorienting thing. And so I was extremely grateful to see how well relationed we are. And in building that confidence, we can
Mm.
send that through our collective system, not as individuals, but as this mycelial network, right, of this earth. And so speaking the word earth takes me to the next piece, which is the deep connection to environmental justice. Right? One of the main thrusts of indigenous feminist thought and theory has been around this question of sovereignty or belonging on land in place with all one's relations. And there's also an incredible stream of environmental justice that has been led by Black folks, and also other streams that have come from, for example, challenging the open air factories in California, led by Mexican American farm workers. And so, how might those streams of environmental justice be in direct communication with Indigenous ways of understanding how we are in relationship to land, what environmental justice means, especially in this time of climate catastrophe, and in this time of a type of green tech revving up, which actually hasn't broken the logics of extraction and exploitation. And so I find this discourse space around anti-colonial arrivancy really helpful for having these humble conversations about how do we maintain the importance of distributing impacts across communities as environmental justice looks out for, because communities of color in this country have been disproportionately impacted by environmental hazards. There's more landfill sites. I recommend Max Lieber-Iron's book, From Discard Studies, Pollution is Colonialism, right? Holding these all together. And so I'm really grateful for the work of the Black Midwest Initiative, which made their Summer Institute in 2025 all about environmental justice, so that we are recognizing that the struggle of the people and the struggle of the earth is one struggle, and seeing ourselves as part of that. And that's so important in healing for Black folks for whom, like, we've been displaced from our land and we've been ripped from our indigeneity for the most part. Like, who are we? Like, what can I claim? Where can I claim? No, well, I can't claim anything except maybe my body, right? So in some ways, for Black folks,
Even that.
our land is our body. And even for Palestinians as well, right? You had the technical right of return. It is not being enacted. More walls are going up, more barriers. As of last week, there was a travel ban issued on people from there. So the separation from kinship and land and space is something that I want to make sure there's a forum for us to be able to sit with it. And then, like, out of that, people are returning to front lines with a more sophisticated analysis about what's at stake, and like then thinking about how they want to take action together and in solidarity, again, with Indigenous communities who are also on those front lines, and like many communities of color, or even as communities of color, have had disproportionate impact on their bodies. So that has been really transformative, because those conversations need more space and need more time, even as conditions deteriorate around us. Biokomo Lafe would say, like, the times are urgent, let us slow down. And so we're slowing down during these sacred fires, and trying to think really carefully about how we show up and what it takes to show up. But knitting together a lot of struggles, and then through that, still, like I said, the struggle of the people and the struggle of the earth are one struggle, but it also just feels really clear how the song of the people and the song of the earth are one song.
I am very touched by this, because it feels like, the grief is so real, of realizing to the level of disconnect is so extreme, of like the disconnect to the land, to body, to spirit, to literally everything that has been ripped away from colonialism and colonization, that you are doing the weaving of us coming back into that unity. And so it is such I am so like inspired by you for creating these spaces that we cannot do it alone either. And, I'm actually currently in a somatic coaching certificate program, and we're learning about how we take shapes and sites of shaping and what shapes us, and how that's at different layers. There's the individual, there's the family, there's the community and institution level, and that at each level, as it gets larger, the more people are needed to create a new shape at that level. And so you creating these spaces for us to like start to reimagine, okay, what could be the new shape of us at the environment level, or at the you're it's incredible, and you're doing it. So yeah, it's just like, wow, I am really, really amazed and inspired by this work. Incredible. My second to last question is around your vision, and really thinking about like, if this was to be the ultimate, vision of what you would want Anticolonial Arrivants to become, what would that be for you?
For sure, I want us to be a part of this amazing ecosystem of those who are working together about anti-colonial racism, right? So I would point to a group like Land Justice Futures, which works directly with mostly Catholic sisters, like nuns who have land and space, but not exclusively with them, and pairs them with people, Black, Indigenous people of color, who are looking for land and wanting to create that relation and then create that partnership. And so there's quite a bit for them of holding together, challenging anti-Black racism and challenging settler colonialism. And so like they also show up at both like Indigenous repair and justice work, and also reparation summits, right? So right now, those communities are sometimes talking repair and reparations, and sometimes painfully not. But I can see us partnering with them. Also, I could see us resourcing any group that is working on anti-racism. There are a lot more people who are interested in and willing to grapple with particularly white privilege, but also impacts of Christian nationalism, and for folks who are white Jewish folks, who are wrestling with anti-Zionism and really coming into this space and starting to acknowledge, all of these fractures. And so when anti-racism work is done, I'm interested in making sure that it is deeply on a foundation of recognition and repair and acknowledgement and connection with and accountability, all those words, towards the local Indigenous presence and context in which it's taking place. And if the place where an anti-racism training is happening is either online, or the impact of genocide, residential schools, and starvation tactics and disease was too much for that place, to also connect with Indigenous-led orgs who work nationally and also place-based way, right? All the way from Siblings in Alaska to Indian Collective, Honor the Earth, Land Back work. There are nations that are close enough to connect with, and to say like, Indigenous folks are not in the history books, like their present and futures matter, and we want a shared future with them, which also means us showing up as our full selves and assisting them also when, like, there's in the past there's been stuff going down with the Cherokee freedmen, right, around like not recognizing Black folks as much, right? So we can also be a resource to say, hey, we see you, and we take seriously the impacts of colonization, the impacts of enslavement, right? And we're also asking, for you not to give in to the ideas of blood quantum and exclusion, that the state wants you to, in order to grant you a little bit more autonomy. Like, let's figure this out together. So like, that's an ultimate vision, right? To be able to be a resource, as well as to be able to respond quickly and with increasing resources to those calls to help block pipelines, to help challenge unjust infrastructure projects, right? Because the infrastructural violence in many communities is severe, and we need people who are resourced and trained. So, as you mentioned in the bio, I do have nonviolent direct action training background. So, being able to do some trainings as well together with others in non-cooperation. I guess a third vision would be to be able to be gently but firmly present in some of this last year and into some of the work like in the area where people might like call like no kings or some of like let's say liberal mobilization, to invite people to know that it's not actually just this one president, but there's a whole line and lineage of dispossession and power over patriarchy and harm doing that happens from that office. And so inviting people into a deeper analysis, not to overwhelm them. That's why I say gently but firmly, but so that as they take their actions, there is a removing of the veil that things could go back to a business as usual and be okay, rather to walk with them into what will be a lifetime of song and struggle, as we re-relate to the land, repair our relations with the web of life, and create reparations where harm has been done, and we reallocate resources in that. So that is some of the dream, and how that like relates to like my home, right? Because I was like born and raised in northern Indiana, a place called Elkhart. Is even though I'm teaching about 2.5 hours away now in the watershed, I'm accountable to my home village. I mean, that is something like that I do see in my lineage from West Africa or other places. Like no matter where people live, they like they take care of the elders back home. So for me, this is also connected with an initiative called Effort, which stands for Eco-Friendly Elkhart, realizing transition and thinking about what we need to do, particularly in the county of Elkhart, to realize transition. We produce like 85% of the world's RVs, and so that's a specific industry that has a lot of impact from the forests of Borneo all the way to fuel intake around the country, right? There's accountabilities we have there, as well as like climate education and getting outdoors and reconnecting with land through gardening and advocating for like transformation of brownfields and addressing their history of urban renewal, right? So Anticolonial Arrivants also flows in through there. And Effort also stands for Eco-Friendly Everywhere, realizing transition, because Elkhart County can't do it on its own. And so that's also like Anticolonial Arrivants has its infrastructural home within that space now, because I'm connected in both of them, but it could be hosted elsewhere. Yeah, whatever we can do to dismantle the doctrine of discovery and domination and find ourselves arriving somatically in a shape that serves to be fed and feed the world.
Gosh, beautiful. So beautiful. May it be so. May it be so. We need it so badly. Oh, that is the revolution right there. The true revolution inside and out. Wow, beautiful. All right. My last question is for you is how people can get involved if they are like, wow, I need to enter this work. I want to be part of this community. And then anything else that you feel is important that you'd like to share with our audience today.
Yes, welcome. Bienvenidos. Everyone come on in. So right now we have a little short link, right? bit.ly/anticolonial arrivants. And that is a way to fill out a form, which has a lot of text as it relates to whoever's getting to the form, figuring out, is this the political formation for them, right? In the sense that we are focused on people of the global majority, and we're focused on those who are committed to accountable and responsible and authentic ways of being in the world. And if there's like a lean into that, then after you fill out that form, you'll automatically get on the listserv. And then you're welcome to join the Sacred Fires or like feel it out from there. And we've also welcomed folks who have flowed in and out, right? Like they started with us and they're like at a moment where they're like, I'm paring down my email inbox. And we're like, go, we bless you, feel free. Like we want everyone to find their different political homes at this time so that they can do the work they want. So bit.ly/Anticolonial Arrivants, and that both A's are capitalized for accessibility would be the way to find us at this time. That's the best. Or I mean, I guess I'm findable on the internet too, and we can start from there. But I'll send you the form, and just happy to connect with whomever, right? Like if there are other students who are thinking about this for their research, or soon we'll probably write something that with Black Midwest Initiative and ongoing that kind of puts this term arrivants out there in the world. And so you may see us at conferences and other places as well.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Yes, I'm on the listserv. I can easily say that, yes, it's such an amazing wealth of resources and conversations. And the session has been like, yeah, the one session that I was able to join was amazing. So I highly recommend a personal testimony for sure to join. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. It was so great to be in community together and such a beautiful discussion. And I'm so excited for where Anticolonial Arrivants arrives to next on its journey. And just thank you again for all the sacred work that you're doing to really elevate our world, our earth, all the people that are really needing this level of intentional healing and community at this time. It's big change work that you're leading. So thank you very much.
You're most welcome. And I'm so grateful for all of my ancestors and those who have poured into me with trust and affection and challenge over the years so that I was able to be a channel of this. And so, yes, onward together in gratitude, peace, and power.
Peace and power. That's it. Thank you so much. Until next time, everyone, this is Rooted in Love. Thank you so much.